We'll get going again. Thanks, Kristen.
Okay, looks like it's recording now.
Okay, great. Thanks. Welcome everyone to our grid resilience planning for extreme heat. This is the fourth in our series of webinars that are trainings for our public utility commissions and state energy offices. I'm Miles Collins at Berkeley Lab. Special thanks to the U.S. Department of Energy's Grid Deployment Office who funds these webinars. This slide shows our agenda here, so I'm just going to give a brief welcome, an overview, and then I'll pass it along. We have a great lineup today over the next 2 hours here. We'll start with Anna Weiss at NARUC will be giving a presentation on the NARUC resilience framework. She's going to review a mini guide to regional coordination during extreme heat and how to apply the framework to that. Then we'll have two panels. We'll start with our panel, State Resilience Planning for Extreme Heat. That will go for about 45 minutes. After the states panel, we'll move along to utility resilience plans and projects. So we'll have three folks from utilities who are joining us to discuss their planning processes and projects that they are working on as well. And then we'll give a brief wrap up at the end. So each panel discussion will include a question and answer session. You can enter your questions in the question and answer box at any time on Zoom. And after the webinar, the slides will be posted at this link, which I will put into the chat briefly. And later we will also post the video recording and post that to the website as well. Just a few housekeeping items. If you could please add your affiliation to your Zoom name on the screen. When you're not speaking, please mute yourself. We'll use the Zoom question and answer feature to ask questions during the meeting. And if you also, when we open it up to Q&A, please feel free to raise your hand to get the floor if you'd like to ask your question live. And just as I mentioned, we'll be recording and posting this session to share with the public. Finally, I want to point everyone to a few other resources related to the topics here. So slides and video recordings are available for the first three regional webinar trainings that we had. So this covered back in August, we looked at extreme cold and ice storms in the Midwest. Back in June, we looked at severe storms and hurricanes in the east and southeast. And then in March, which is when we had our first one, we looked at wildfires in the west. There's two other links for training sessions which have slides and video recordings. One was from Planning for Distribution Systems, DERs and Resilience, from March 2024, and then we have another one that was in the Southeast back in 2023. There's a link to Berkeley Lab's reliability and resilience research webpage. I just wanted to point out two studies in particular that were recently published. One is on grid resilience plans, which reviews state requirements, utility practices, and then it includes a utility plan template. And then second, bridging the gap on data metrics and analyses for grid resilience weather events, which covered the types of data and metrics and analyses that utility plans include and that regulators can request. Finally, at the bottom, we have links to NARUC and NASIO's grid resilience resources. And with that, I will hand this off to Anna Weiss at NARUC. And if you'd like to come on camera.
Sure. Thank you so much, Miles.
There we go. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to jump into the presentation. My name is Anna Weiss, and I am a technical specialist with NARUC at the Center for Partnerships and Innovation. This is our technical assistance arm where we support our membership in however we can be helpful. And today I'll be presenting on the NARUC Resilience Framework in Action mini guide, the topic being regional coordination during extreme heat. Next slide, please. So important context is first to cover the NARUC Resilience Framework. So we published the NARUC Resilience Framework in the beginning of 2025 in partnership with the Department of Energy's Grid Deployment Office. This framework provides regulators with a structured approach to considering and developing resilience actions. The idea is that as our grid challenges evolve, the framework is a practical place for regulators to start. Next slide, please. Furthermore, it is important to note that this framework is not prescriptive, but rather supports context-specific solutions. The document is flexible and can be tailored to your unique team, state, region, and resources. Within the framework, there are 6 core components. We have goals and objectives, use cases, definitions, process leadership and participation, design questions, and implementation. Next slide, please. So you can move through these 6 core components, starting with goals and objectives in the top left-hand corner and moving clockwise all the way through. Importantly, users also do not have to use all 6 of the components if they do not apply to your context. You could also focus in on one particular step or core component. For example, in July at the NARUC Summer Policy Summit, we hosted a grid resilience workshop where we just focused on the goals and objectives core component. This is just to illustrate the flexibility of the document because, again, it is supposed to support context-specific solutions as opposed to being a prescriptive resilience document. So today we will be applying each of these core components to our selected topic, which is extreme heat and regional coordination. Next slide, please. So to demonstrate the framework in action or in application, we created this mini guide, which applies the framework to a timely resilience concern, extreme heat. Taking the topic further, we explored regional coordination during extreme heat, since it can often be a regional concern. The document was published in August of 2025, also in partnership with GDO, and is linked there and available on our NARUC resilience page. Next slide. Great, okay. So extreme heat can be handled as a resilience concern when we consider the confluence of stress that it can cause. Demand spikes from an increase in AC usage region-wide in tandem with supply strain due to reduced efficiency in generation and transmission can create a perfect storm for things like rolling blackouts or other major grid stresses. Next slide. Extreme heat is primarily a reliability concern, but in its extremities, it can become a resilience concern. So there is value in treating it as such or considering it as such. The greater relationship between reliability and resilience illustrates this. Reliability is defined as the day-to-day grid performance in the face of routine uncertainty in operating conditions. Resilience is the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions and withstand and recover from big disruptions. Reliability is a bad day during blue sky conditions, right? While resilience is really talking about gray sky conditions or perhaps black sky conditions as well. Importantly, reliability weaknesses compound during resilience events. So those reliability weaknesses can really make the resilience events harder to recover from, and cascade further. Also, reliability does tend to improve with resilience investments. Sorry. Can we mute? Thank you so much. Awesome. Next slide, please. Great. So now we will jump into the 6 core components and apply them to our selected topic of regional coordination during extreme heat. I won't read every bullet on every slide from henceforth, but these slides will be posted as Miles mentioned if you want to dive deeper into the details. Next slide, please. So first, we will cover goals and objectives. Goals are desired outcomes that are aligned with policies, laws, and statutes. They may be legally binding or aspirational, depends on the context. Objectives are targets and activities that help achieve one or more goals. They may inform the tasks or steps necessary to reach those goals. Next slide, please. So when applied to our topic of regional coordination during extreme heat, goals can be things like improving interjurisdictional coordination, prioritizing load capacity in high-risk zones, and ensuring continuity of safe service during extreme events. Objectives can be items like establishing shared heatwave protocols, creating a regional inventory of backup generation, or conducting tabletop exercises. So hopefully this illustrates the difference between goals and objectives in this context, and this is a helpful first step when tackling the framework. So next slide, please. Next, we have use cases. A use case is really the scenario, it's the context, the set and the setting. A use case can either be a collection of incidences around your resilience event or around extreme heat in this context, or it could be a hypothetical yet predictable scenario around which your activities can be programmed. Next slide. So one interpretation of use cases in this context is gathering real events in your region or basing your planning off of a real regional heat wave that happened and presented a greater grid concern. To illustrate this, I had some headlines here for a 2023 Pacific Northwest heat wave that had some particular grid stresses. So if I was a regulator from the Pacific Northwest, perhaps I would be basing our planning off of this recent specific heat wave. Next slide. Or another interpretation is to somewhat fictionalize an event, but using details that you would expect to occur in your region. This could be a great use for generative AI. That's what I did with this paragraph here. I asked a generative AI platform to create a scenario for me that had details that I was looking for. So just scanning the first couple sentences, the set and setting is a sustained heat wave forecasted to hit multiple states in the same ISO over a 5-day period in mid-July, and so on and so forth. So this is a good, perhaps AI use if you're interested, or you can base it off of a real event. Next slide, please. Moving on to definitions. Understandably, differences in how terms are used and understood can create confusion or disagreement. Definitions are exceptionally important for regional coordination as they ensure that resilience actions taken in one jurisdiction are understood by the stakeholders and partners in another jurisdiction. So quite an important step. Next slide. Some definitions you may want to consider when building your resilience plan for extreme heat. Having a shared definition of resilience. Also for regional coordination. What is the region in question and what is the level of coordination? Next slide. Additionally, an extreme heat event should be clearly defined. I would imagine that this would be different in the American Southwest as opposed to the American Northeast. Are you only considering temperature, or are you also considering humidity and duration? These are some critical things to discern early on. Additionally, critical load. Regionally, stakeholders should have a shared understanding of which facilities qualify as critical, such as cooling centers or water systems. And also, grid data should be a shared definition as well, or it could be a shared definition as well. These are just some ideas, but they're a useful place to start. Next slide, please. Next, we have process leadership and participation. This is really the who's who step, and certainly is important for regional coordination in this context. Who is the coordinator? Who leads the operation? Who monitors the data? The goal is clear roles and responsibilities to achieve effective communication. Next slide. So when applied to our extreme heat topic, regulators might ask and decide, does the commission have appropriate staff to run or support proceedings on regional coordination and extreme heat? Are there other state or local agencies that should be formally included? Should the proceeding involve partnerships with other state commissions or regional entities like ISOs? Really determining, the who's who is a quite critical step. Next slide, please. Next, we have design questions. Design questions guide the planning efforts themselves. They define the scope, can structure proceedings, and ensure the processes stay aligned with your objectives, even as circumstances develop or technology evolves. Next slide. When applied to our topic, design questions may look something like these. What specific heat-related threats should be included in planning? Should efforts focus only on high temperature days? If you live in a wildfire risk region, you might want to consider, those implications. What level of coordination is being pursued? Is the effort focused on information sharing or shared planning, joint emergency response, or operational integration? What kinds of agreements are appropriate? How will coordination work across IOUs and other regulated or unregulated entities like co-ops and munis? Additionally, how will the process remain adaptive? This is a very important question, in my opinion. Building in time for lessons learned is critical to this adaptive and evolving environment. Next slide. Lastly, we have implementation. It's how it sounds. It is our pathway forward. This step may require deadlines, task assignments, and time built in for lessons learned and review. Since heat waves are recurring and foreseeable, implementation in this context can emphasize seasonal readiness and long-term investment review. Next slide. So questions regulators may decide here include which entity will lead the implementation, how will regional coordination be operationalized in real time, and what near-term actions can be taken ahead of time for the next heat season. Next slide. Great. So to conclude, I have some resources. Just to conclude on the topic quickly, we know that extreme heat is a growing and foreseeable threat. Regional coordination is essential to mitigating its impacts. And the NARUC Resilience Framework offers a flexible, structured approach to guide regulatory planning and action to this topic, but also to a variety of other topics. And that's a good segue into our available resources. I invite you to look at the NARUC page on grid resilience. There are plenty of resources available to you, including the original framework. That might be a great place to start to understand the flow of the planning process best. Additionally, I have 2 webinars I'd like to point out. They are recordings and have slides posted as well. First, we have this NARUC Grid Resilience Framework, a Practical Application webinar. This is a webinar led by Miles, actually, in LBNL, and this applied the framework to wildfire mitigation instead of extreme heat. So it walked through basically what I just did, but with a different topic to illustrate the flexibility of the framework. And then additionally, I want to point out this Steady and Strong, the Case for Reliability and Resilience webinar. This was also an LBNL NARUC partnership, and the recording and slides are there. I think that webinar does a great job of illustrating the interconnected and interdependent relationship between reliability and resilience. And that is, I think, very fundamental to understanding treating extreme heat as a resilience concern, since it's such a reliability topic. So I would invite you to look at that to discern more details about the relationship between reliability and resilience. And with that, I believe I am finished. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Anna. With that, no, really appreciate that. And like I said, we will be posting these slides to our webinar site shortly after the meeting concludes. And I will let everyone know with an email and send the link in the email as well. I guess we have a couple minutes if anyone has any questions they'd like to put in the chat for Anna, or if they'd like to come off of mute. Okay. Thanks, Anna. With that, if I could ask our first set of panelists to come on camera and off of mute, we can get started. Oh, was this Abrard? Did you have a question you would like to ask? I see your hand is up. I didn't see that.
Yeah, sure. One quick question to Anna.
Yeah.
So how do you see the challenges of grid resiliencies in the wake of growth in the AI data centers, which obviously impact the energy demand and supply requirements, and also put pressures on the ratepayers' affordability? So how this potential growth in AI data center will affect the grid resiliency, and what are the plans to cope with this situation?
Absolutely. This is, yeah, potentially the most important question right now in utility regulation. Is definitely a hot topic. Specifically for extreme heat planning, it's brings us back to a demand issue. As load growth is accelerating and demand is accelerating, that brings more potentially instability into the supply chain and impacts rates. So if you can imagine a community or a region that has load growth and a demand spike because of data centers, and so resources are already strained, and then a heat wave comes in, it's really putting in all of these real testy variables into one, and definitely is difficult to ensure safe service. As for a solution to that, I believe the regulatory community is really in the thick of discerning that, and also it's a bit regionally specific. So what I will do is I will quickly go in the next presentation. I'm going to go on the NARUC website and pop a couple things into the chat. Some of my colleagues are leading some really great work focusing on load growth and data centers and AI. So I'll try to pop some things into the chat because I think that work can be greater articulated by them. But to answer your question, for this context, it really becomes a supply and demand issue. It can introduce more stress into potentially an already strained grid in July in the middle of a heat wave. I'm from Pennsylvania. My parents never had air conditioning until about last year. We really had to, and if you think about the increased use of AC during the summer, it can really cause some resources issues. But thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank
and
you.
yeah, Abrar, I'd encourage you too. We can bring that topic back up too when during our panels. You can save that question in your quiver, and we can address it too for the states panel and utilities panel.
Sure, Miles. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. With that, if we could have Kelly and Sean, if you guys are able to come on camera and off of mute, then we'll get our panel started here. And with that, this just briefly, this webinar was developed in close partnership with NARUC and NASIO, and with that, moderating our first panel is Kirsten Verklas, who's the Senior Managing Director at NASIO. And I will pass it off to you, Kirsten. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Miles. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having NASIO participate. And I'm excited about moderating the state panel with two excellent panelists. Joining me today for our state panel is Kelly Cutts, who is the Senior Lead Project Manager at the Georgia Environmental Financing Authority, as well as Sean Hazard, who is the Emergency Management Coordinator at the Public Utility Commission of Texas. So really excited to have you both here, Kelly and Sean. And I wanted to maybe get you all started with one question, and then I have a bunch of questions for you, but I also invite the audience to put questions in the chat and to kind of interact with our state panelists here. And so hopefully we can get a good conversation between the panelists and the audience going. But to start, maybe Kelly, if I could ask you first, if you could give a brief overview of kind of resilience planning in your state and your agency's role in the process and sort of what's going on in Georgia.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Um, so it's kind of confusing. Our office name is the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, but our Energy Resources Division serves as the state energy office for Georgia. So in that role, we manage state energy program funding. We serve as the lead agency for Emergency Support Function 12 for the state. We're responsible for updating the state energy security plan. We also manage the grid resilience projects through under the Grid Deployment Office, the GRIP and 40101D programs. And I'm going to talk a little bit too, I think, about some resiliency efforts statewide that are being compiled by other agencies. The University of Georgia has done a great job of working towards that. And then there was a House Study Committee last year that wrapped up the end of 2024 with some recommendations on how we can better support resiliency in Georgia. Started actually before Hurricane Helene, but went through that process and had some great recommendations as a result of that. So I guess specific to heat, the GEMA, or Georgia Emergency Management Agency, manages the Georgia Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment. And in 2017, extreme heat was added to that plan, but they kind of tie it in specifically with drought and fire risks. So let's see, it says in 2017, the Georgia Hazard Mitigation Plan showed an increase from 22% to 28% of the counties reporting incidents. The three primary areas affected there are public health, especially those at higher risk of loss of power due to cooling systems, the economic impact from crop failures and livestock loss, and then related wildfire risks. So that is how we function right now, specific to extreme heat resilience planning in Georgia.
Great, thank you, Kelly. And I'll pose the same question to Sean and your perspective from Texas and how resilience planning is done in your state and what your agency's role is in resilience planning.
So I guess let me give you a little bit about myself. I am the Emergency Management Coordinator for the PUC. I work within the Division of Critical Infrastructure Security and Risk Management, which is a comparatively new division within the agency that just went through its 50th anniversary of existence. For a very long time, well, since its inception, the PUC of Texas has been viewed as the economic regulator for the energy industry within Texas. And that includes both the ERCOT utilities and the non-ERCOT utilities that provide service. We have found, and we've always been, in my mind, pretty good with the economic regulation. I've been with the commission for it'll be 27 years this year doing the emergency management role since about 2017, 2016, 2017. And what I have seen is that both our agency internally and our legislature, God bless them, have really started, I don't want to say shifting because we still do all the regulatory work, but they've really been adding resilience and security concerns to the repertoire of the agency, which has been great for me because it's created the opportunity that I have now. When you get into resilience in the last 5 or 6 years, there have been, and let's be honest, it's all happened since COVID and Winter Storm Uri happened in the state. We've been getting a lot, every session there seems to be a stream of bills of new wonderful ideas that the legislature thinks are awesome for the grid and would like to see us implement. And a great many of them are now resiliency focused. I mean, it only took them 50 years to figure this out, but hey, they finally figured it out. This is a safe space, right? We have implemented weatherization rules. We have implemented grid security rules. We're focusing on resilience and reliability in spite of cyber, and we're even looking at EMP protection for the grid. This particular session, we have added requirements now to create rules where utilities, wildfire mitigation. We have, in fact, there is even a bill passed where we must now, or where we will now require utilities to submit pole replacement plans. Pretty detailed plans talking about how much and how often they're going to replace their infrastructure. All of this follows what I would consider to be a fairly typical regulatory process. We put our heads together at the agency, we come up with a proposal. That proposal is then available to the public and to stakeholders in the industry to make comment. We go back and revise our proposals based on those comments. Sometimes, we evaluate those comments for inclusion, and then it goes to our commission to implement the rule as required by whatever the change in the law is. There has been a lot. It has been a very interesting, probably 5 years, to see the volume of work that's been done, requiring utilities to be a little bit more, I don't want to say prepared, as a utility, in the way the Texas market is set up. Reliability and resilience is important because it's their profit center. But they haven't always had to share their plans and their efforts, or have those plans and efforts evaluated by anybody but themselves. And so it's been real interesting to see these requirements come in and to get them put into place.
Great. Thank you for that detailed overview, Sean. And I think in the beginning of the webinar, we had a slide detailing also a third panelist for this session. That would have been Kylie Mackey with the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, or the State Energy Office there. Unfortunately, she's out sick today, so we'll just pinch hit for her and think about also things that are extreme heat that maybe impact the northern part of this country. But I mentioned in the chat, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hands while we discuss some of these issues. So both of you, Kelly and Sean, mentioned sort of the financial part of mitigating heat impact. And I was curious if, thinking about it either from sort of the taxpayer funding that states are implementing through 4101D, or the investments that are ultimately done by IOUs that get rate-based. I was curious if you could kind of outline where you think some of the needs are, and if you think some of that investment is adequate, or if there's more investment that needs to be done by the utilities in terms of grid resilience to mitigate specifically for heat. Maybe we'll go to you first, Kelly.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in the Southeast right now in resilience planning at several levels. I mentioned the Georgia House Study Committee on Disaster Mitigation and Resilience. So, like Sean, excited to see, you know, the interest there from the legislature. They did make a recommendation to revise state building codes to include requiring new build nursing homes and assisted living to have a secondary power source, including a requirement for existing facilities to install power transfer switches within 5 to 10 year timeline. That is moving forward in Georgia Building Code. So I'm excited for that. Again, there was the University of Georgia assessment on resiliency. I'll share the link to that in the chat. And they did a great job of, you know, they really moved around the state. Georgia's maybe unique. We like to think that we're special. I'm sure everybody feels their state is special, but you know, it varies a lot from the northern parts of the state down through the plains and into the coastal regions. So they did a great job of engaging stakeholders and regional commissions around the state and really kind of determining where the investments are needed depending on each region. I am excited for the grid investments in coming through 40101D. Those are really starting to move quickly, some of them through our office. We've got 26 million in the first 3 years of the 40101D funding that will be that we've contracted with utilities for grid upgrades, and then are still somewhat hopeful that our GRIP award will continue to move forward in partnership with Oglethorpe Power Company, Georgia Transmission, and GSOC. So just hopeful that over the next several years we continue to invest in those resiliency upgrades statewide.
Great. And Sean, how is it in Texas in terms of investment? And do you feel like it's adequate, or is there a discussion about what investment have to come from the ratepayers versus the taxpayers?
So we have, and I'm not a great numbers guy. I'm sure I can quickly pull some up if we get some specific questions. But one of the big things is on the generation side is we have now created what we call the Texas Energy Fund, which is out there to try and drive investment in putting steel in the ground for new gas, primarily combined cycle gas style plants, to help build the overall fleet within Texas to try and get more folks investing in adding because we're consistently seeing high growth and demand every year. To kind of talk a little bit about what Kelly mentioned is on the smaller side of things, we're seeing that entities like our nursing facilities, elder care facilities, there are requirements out there for them to have backup generation. But in many cases, and this even extends to some of the hospitals and healthcare facilities, they're not getting adequate backup generation. Having backup generation on an elder care facility in August in Central Texas that can keep the lights on and maybe the oxygen supply machines running, but not the air conditioning, is not sufficient. We have had issues where we've had to, during a hurricane or something else, during an extended power outage lasting more than a day or two in the middle of summer, the state has had to help evacuate some of these facilities because You cannot survive if you are in a medically fragile state in a facility that has no air conditioning. So we are working to expand that. And the reason I bring that up is there is a piece of the Texas Energy Fund that is what we call, and this is a horrible name, but the Texas Backup Power Package Program that we are working on implementing right now. We're developing the rules behind it, where critical infrastructure like those kind of facilities, or in some of our small towns, it could go to their grocery store, or anything that kind of serves as a lifeline for a population, can apply for what we hope to make a forgivable loan to install a robust backup package at their facility. We're still kind of outlining that, but it's very exciting to hear, because there are a lot of our regional councils of government that know of facilities that directly support a small community during a disaster that they just can't afford to put backup power on. On the transmission distribution side, we are seeing there's always room for improvement. Electric utilities, it's by their nature, typically, when infrastructure goes up, it stays up until it's damaged, or there's not traditionally a planned replacement for broad swaths of infrastructure, right? You wait until something happens to it, then you rebuild it to the new standards. What we're seeing recently from the resiliency plans that utilities are submitting for review is they're finally starting to take that step to replace aging infrastructure before it breaks. I think Encore, who is our largest provider in the state customer-wise, submitted, I want to say it was something in the neighborhood of $5 billion over 4 years of investment. And I'm probably going to get this wrong because I can never remember exactly where the breakdown is. But the capital investments that come through in their rate cases, I believe it's the capital investments that they are not entitled to a return on. So they can get the money back over time, but they can't make money on the capital investments. So that can kind of help mitigate the cost increase. But the problem is you have a 50 to 70-year-old system, and it's going to cost money to bring it back up. So all of this will have an impact on a customer at the end of the day.
That's really interesting. Thanks, Sean. On kind of what you outlined, this critical infrastructure piece, can you maybe explain a little bit how in Texas you all are identifying critical infrastructure? Is that more of a local government bottom-up approach? Is there a statewide approach on this?
Man, that is a loaded question that we could have a full conversation on. Nobody, and this goes from the smallest town in Texas up to DOE, seems to want to make the final determination on what exactly is critical infrastructure. It's a battle I fight every day in the emergency management role. We all know what it is, but we don't want to list what it is, because eventually, I guess the fear is something's going to be left out. I can think back to Winter Storm Uri, where we had a particular vendor, they are a semiconductor, and I will say for the record, it was not Samsung, who, while we were in load shed, was operating off backup generation. And if backup generation failed, there could be the potential for a release of a flare off or something it's not good for the chemical facility. But they were up and running fine on their backup generation. Well, is backup generation enough to keep that protected, right? Do we want to prioritize them and remove them from load shed requirements? That's a great question that needs to be answered way above my pay grade. We do have within the Department of Public Safety, which is the body that houses our state troopers, a Department of Homeland Security for Texas. And within that agency, there is, and within that division, the Homeland Security Division, we have developed the Texas Critical Infrastructure Protection Task Force. And that group is working diligently, not so much to define what critical infrastructure is, but gather the data of what locals and state level officials, local, county, and state level officials think is critical in their areas. So we have a list, but we don't necessarily have a agreement from on high that everything on that list really is critical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And that's really interesting. And I will assure you, you're not the only state struggling with this question. And so that's why I was asking this. And I think also in light of, additions to the grid, like data centers and hyperscalers, the question of what is critical infrastructure is also on top of minds. I live in Northern Virginia, and some people might argue that, the data centers that house critical data for the military and the Department of Defense is very critical. So there's sort of different dimensions of that. I don't know, Kelly, in Georgia, how you all are thinking about critical infrastructure and if there's any definition you all are working on.
No, not to my knowledge. I mean, I think that we're kind of in the same boat. Nobody wants to really draw the lines around what is and what isn't. So, we've done some funding for programs in the past for solar plus battery at critical facilities, but we did leave it up to the communities to tell us what was critical to them. So yeah, we're kind of dancing that same fine line.
The one thing I will say, Kristen, and this is just sort of an emergency manager's truism, we have lots of sayings in emergency management, but if everything is critical, nothing is critical.
Yep, that's very true. That's very true. You all both already mentioned a little bit that there's more than, grid resilience investments, that the buildings code conversation plays a lot of plays a role in this. And I was curious in both of your states how much coordination there is sort of with some of these plans. I know in some states there's a requirement for utilities to file grid resilience plans. Sean, you touched on kind of distribution and transmission build out being part of it. How much do you all require, or how much do the utilities kind of coordinate on a lot of these plans that they're submitting to the PUC or other entities, be it a grid resilience, a distribution plan, an IRP, etc.? Maybe I'll go to Sean first.
For us, the privately owned companies, your Encores, your CenterPoints, are required to submit their plans to us because there's a cost to them and it's part of their TCOS case, and that's how they're reviewed. We don't have, and I don't know, I probably should have mentioned this, we don't have, as the PUC of Texas, a lot of oversight over our municipally owned utilities and our co-ops. The story, that as I understand it, is that when those were created, in theory, the people who live within those boundaries of the co-op and the munis have the authority over them by virtue of being able to vote in a board for the co-op or vote in the city council for the muni. Interestingly, some of these recent plans, the wildfire plan I mentioned earlier, was actually written so that the munis and co-ops that are in risk enhanced risk areas will actually have to come to us with their plans, but there will not be a financial component necessarily for them because we don't approve their rates.
Great, thank you. And for Kelly, I'm going to ask the question slightly different, but I was curious to hear a little bit about the state energy security plan and how that sort of ties in with resilience planning from the utilities, and how you sort of see, now that you all have done a state energy security plan, how you will see sort of the planning going forward and where there's some alignment and coordination happening.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that over the last couple years, we have realized that we could be engaging more closely with the Public Service Commission in Georgia and the IRP process as it comes to updating and improving on our state energy security plan. Right now, that's something that we aren't currently doing. Again, I think it's something that we look forward to doing in the future as we're continuing to improve upon that plan. Yeah, I know also in the realm of data centers, there's been a lot more conversation with some of the national labs engaging the states and the Public Service Commission as well in planning and preparing guidance around data centers and things like that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity coming for us to start engaging with resilience planning and our IOUs, co-ops and munis and with the PSC.
Great. And just another reminder, if you all have questions for our panelists, to just put them in the chat or raise your hand. I don't think I see any of them right now, but please feel free to think of your questions for our esteemed panelists. So I think one question I would always like to ask is sort of what's been the biggest success story so far in each of your states, and specifically about planning and investments to mitigate extreme heat. So be curious to hear, sort of looking back last 5 years or so, what you would say, okay, this has been really a great success story that I want to share with fellow states and state agencies. And maybe Kelly, I'll go to you first this time.
Yeah, so a couple of things, and really not specific to extreme heat, but more overall resiliency in Georgia. Around 2019, as a result of multiple hurricanes impacting Georgia in 2016, 2017, 2018, we looked into creating a solar resiliency technical assistance program. And we partnered with a consultant to kind of, multi-phased approach, hosted a workshop to kind of level set and define resiliency a little bit more for local governments. We worked with the consultant to conduct feasibility studies for local governments who had been impacted by hurricanes or storms in the past to see if it's actually feasible to, create more resilient buildings using solar and battery, what that would look like realistically. And then we did fund some installations based on that. And then afterwards, we've created a kind of a best practice guide, toolkit, and an RFP template that's available on our website for local governments who are interested in considering that. I will say that we've had some lessons learned from that and are now revisiting kind of how to bring that full circle in, how these systems are commissioned, making sure that the folks at the local level are, well versed in monitoring the software, using the battery, what it can power when there is an outage. So just trying to, our next steps on this, I think we'll be launching in early 2026, is to kind of come back full circle and provide some tools for local governments to, have a better idea on the O&M side and commissioning, do some case studies on the installations that we did over the last 5 years and see how we can improve upon that. I think that we really you know, we were really impacted by Helene. And I think I put the link in the chat to the University of Georgia assessment, statewide resilience assessment. And the recommendations that came out of that are really exciting. A lot of them have to do with, you know, scaling up regional resilience planning frameworks, communicating and defining the economic benefits for resilience. I think a lot of times there's some hesitancy in like, what's the real benefit of prevention? So anyway, I think that's what we're proud of here and have a lot to look forward to.
Great. Yeah. And I highly recommend to any state agency partnering with your state university or local university on some of these planning and sort of, you know, technical systems, sort of taking stock of what's happening in your state and kind of looking to develop some plans if you need further expertise than in-house. So Sean, what's been your success story in Texas?
In the last 5 years, I'm going to say there have been two. Kelly mentioned one of my giddy phrases, the threat and hazard identification and risk assessment. As I said, I am an emergency management nerd, but everybody I talk to, I proselytize THIRA, and I suggest every utility, every regulator, everybody involved in a critical industry like the energy industry, take a THIRA class, because it is what I like to joke as the improv of emergency management, because it's always about yes and. You have exceptional heat. Okay, and now we're gonna say that you haven't had any rain in a while, and so now you're in an exceptional drought. And now you're in a drought, so what does that bring in? Wildfire. We have to think about that. And why I mention it is because Winter Storm Uri, if I don't know how many people here are familiar with Texas, but if you're doing a THIRA and you are doing a risk assessment for CenterPoint Energy in Houston, you're going to have hurricanes way up here, and you're going to have sub-freezing temperatures for 7 to 9 straight days, way down at the bottom of the list, and they're not going to be prepared for those conditions. Well, the success is the winterization rules that were put in place after Uri, accompanied by the inspections that ERCOT is now required to do, because it makes sure everybody is thinking ahead and looking at all the risks overall. Our infrastructure is effectively built to deal with that heat and extended heat, but it was not built to deal with extended cold. So that was one success. And then the other, which I think is probably the most interesting, having watched our supply and demand issues this summer, is the growth of battery storage, grid level battery storage. It's incredible to me to think that we had about 200 megawatts of battery storage in the state in 2020, and we should have almost 16,000 megawatts online by the end of this year. That has been an incredible boon to our resiliency, because we love our wind here in Texas and we love our solar, but it's almost guaranteed that when it gets super hot or super cold, there's going to be problems with both of those. The wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine when it's super hot and super cold. The sun will shine, I'm sorry. But especially in the winter, when things start freezing, we lose all that. And these batteries have now made the difference in getting us over our peak demands. It's really fascinating to see that our tightest grid conditions over the summer are now actually later than they had been before. And it's because the solar's coming down. Will the wind come up fast enough to compensate for the solar coming down? And the batteries have really, really filled the breach at that point. So I think that's a big, big thing for Texas.
Right. And Kelly, just one final comment on maybe key takeaways for other states that you would want to highlight, or any final comments you have. I know you have to hop off.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to have to hop off. I know Sean and Kirsten, you guys can take any questions that may come up. I think, you know, really defining statewide resiliency, coordinating and scaling, ways that we can address this. As a state, I think looking at it, I don't know, in Georgia, sometimes we get a little siloed in our state agencies. So working more closely together on, everything from agriculture and food to transportation and the built environment, as well as energy and the hazard impacts across all of those. So I'm hopeful that that's what's coming down the road for us in Georgia, but we'll do what we can.
That's such a great point, and thank you for joining us today. Callie, really appreciate giving the perspective from Georgia. And to Sean's point on Thyra, I also love Thyra. So I put a few links in the chat for people if you're not familiar with Thyra and to kind of look at that, but also talk to your state emergency management agency who will, I'm sure, tell you all about Thyra and what they've been doing. And so maybe one final question for you, Sean, as we transition to the utility panel. But when you're evaluating competing resilience solutions like grid hardening and microgrids and building codes and DER programs, et cetera, are there any kind of analysis frameworks that you've seen that that you find most useful from the PUC side?
Honestly, I'd love for you to ask me that question in 12 months. Because the answer is, I don't know that we found the right ones yet. We're taking a build a little bit from here and a little bit from here. That's the most interesting part of working emergency management, or even just in the energy industry in a state like Texas. I will often meet with my counterparts in other states, and they're like, oh, we get hurricanes. Oh, we get floods. Or over here, oh, we get tornado. And every single threat that all the other states face, we have them all here. I always like dropping this fact on folks that we average probably an earthquake a day in the state of Texas. And nobody knows that. But we're fortunate in that I'm going to knock on wood, I should not have said that A word. They're usually, fairly small, 2 to 3 on the scale, and they're out where people don't live. Thank God. But it's still in development.
Okay. We will come back to you in 12 months. Are there any final things you want to say before we wrap up?
I think the best thing is what she said. It's the collaboration. We all get focused on our particular line of work. As I said, we were a regulatory body for decades. And even within our agency, we're working diligently to bring our regulators online in thinking of overall, emergency management, resilience, and planning. And you cannot do that in a silo. And that's absolutely the most important.
Yes, totally second that. And thank you so much for joining this panel, Sean. And I want to just highlight the coordination between NASIO and NARUC, where we try to bring state energy offices and PUCs together to talk about some of these issues. And then NASIO also has a really strong relationship with NEMA, which is the Emergency Management Agency's national organization. So if any of you aren't connected to that and want to be more involved in those kind of efforts, feel free to reach out to me or to NEMA or NARUC, and we'll make that happen. So with that, thank you so much to our 2 panelists, and I'll turn it back over to Miles.
Yes, thanks so much. Sean, Kelly, big thanks for being panelists and providing support. And Kirsten, thanks so much for moderating, and wishing Kyla a speedy recovery. With that, if we can have the 3 utility panelists come on camera and off mute. And moderating this panel will be Hylea O'Quinn, who's a policy advisor at NARUC's Center for Partnerships and Innovations. So with that, I will hand it off to Hylea.
Thank you, Miles. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Hyleo Quinn, like Miles said. I'm with NARUC Center for Partnerships and Innovation, along with my colleague Anna, who you heard from earlier, where we support state utility commissions, strengthen grid resilience and affordability across the country and territories. I am very happy to be here moderating today's utility panel. Um, at NARUC, our members are the state utility regulators. However, we are very eager to hear directly from utilities whenever we can with their perspectives to help bridge that gap between policy intent and operational reality, showing us what's working, what's challenging, and where new opportunities are emerging. So thank you all for joining us today. And thank you to each of our panelists who are sharing your time and your insights. We'll go ahead and get started. Each utility will share their insight, some with slides, some with just conversation, and then we will pause briefly for a question in between. If there aren't any questions, feel free to populate the Q&A because we will have a larger Q&A at the end. So first, we have Nathan Brunel. Nathan is the Vice President of Resilience and Capital Delivery at CenterPoint Energy in Texas. Thank you, Nathan.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, good to go.
All right. I appreciate that. I'm Nathan Brownell. I lead our resiliency and capital delivery team here at CenterPoint. So this is a new organization that was built following last year's events here in Texas. So for folks not familiar with Texas, the Houston area was challenged with Hurricane Beryl and the storm of derecho that came through. So severely impacted our customers. And from that, we had a lot of lessons learned, including more of a dedicated approach to how we do our long-term resiliency. So my organization was created to really focus on that. So one of the things that my team is leading is the execution of our resiliency plan. I know Sean had mentioned about the utilities here in Texas are required to file a resiliency plan. So for us, we had filed a 3 years, about $6 billion resiliency plan that was transmission, distribution, substation, major underground, kind of all inclusive to address the challenges we're having here in the Houston area. So CenterPoint's got around just under 3 million customers here in the Houston area. Stat I like to throw out. So the FEMA and NOAA puts out yearly extreme weather risk for each county across the United States. Harris County is number one in both of those. So we have high level of flooding, wind, freeze risk, wildfire, everything. We have a ton of risk in the Houston area that we have to really build our grid to be resilient from. And so we have the privilege to serve one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, home to one of the busiest ports, one of the largest medical center. We're seeing growths of 2 to 3% a year. And so with this rapid expansion, we've got to build a system that can withstand that. And so our resiliency plan really addresses a plethora of different risks, from extreme wind, flooding, high heat, physical attacks, extreme temperature, all of those things. And so when I think about resiliency, it's really how do we handle the extreme weather, so either we can mitigate potential outages from those, or we can get back quickly from outages resulting from the extreme weather. And so I think a lot of the topic here today was around high heat. And so when I think about high heat, I think two different functions of that. It's around capacity. So when for Houston, we have a lot of load, and typically under high heat conditions, people are increasing their ACs. They want to be cool, and so we're seeing a high load from there. So additional capacity is key for us. So our resiliency plan has defined resilient or capacity expansions where we are, adding bigger conductor to areas to handle the load, or we're actually expanding some substations to add capacity, because I think it's critical that the substations do have that additional capacity so that you can transfer load between the other in areas where you may have a risk, a certain outage, or you have a failure. capacity allows you to restore customers much, much quicker. The other thing that I think about on the distribution side and for resiliency on high heat is one issue that we have annually here in Houston is I'll call it the transformer tsunami. So as you go into the springtime, you usually have that first or second day where you get up 100 plus degrees and you start seeing transformers starting to fail. They're at the end of life. We've started to experiment with new sensors on our lines to really identify transformer failures before they actually fail. So you can start detecting those fuses, or you can detect issues on the cables, vegetation that's on the line. So there's two different vendors that are out there we're utilizing to really look at that type of the risk, so we can get ahead of it. Because ideally, we'd like to go and change out those transformers before they fail, because you're likely doing it when the customer's the least amount of impacted on the least amount of cost when you can do it planned. So those are two things that we're really focusing on, is just trying to convert things from reactive to proactive. So I can go in a lot more detail on the whole resiliency plan. We had over 39 different measures associated with that. It's a huge endeavor. It's the largest investment in our company's history, and just got a lot of passion from it. So happy to talk more about it with any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. I think I will merge a couple of questions that have already been in the chat, but specifically about your resiliency plan. What were the considerations you took when you were evaluating the different solutions that you wanted to put in your plan?
So I think the starting spot is, what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to solve for? So for us, we know what all the extreme weather events that we are potentially going to experience here in Houston. So if we're on extreme wind, what are the type of things that you could do to mitigate from extreme wind? It may be hardened pole, like adding hardened poles. It may be strategic undergrounding some sections of our area. It may be adding more automation devices or different type of automation devices to be able to either segment the circuit or be able to fully automate it. Another part of that we look at is, do we have the right vegetation trim sequence in order? So on average, we're around 5.5. We're going to a 3-year trim cycle across. So all of those are different components. So when you look at those type of areas, then you start breaking down, all right, if I want to go to a bigger pole to address wind speeds, what are the best types of poles that are out there? Traditionally, we've used all wood poles, ductile iron, a little bit of concrete that's out there, but something that we have been using a lot over the last 3 or 4 years has been composite poles. So for us, when we looked at, hey, we need to harden a pole, and about 60% of our poles are in rear easements. So in rear easements, to put a certain type of pole to meet our wind loading standards, it would be almost an H-class pole, which those are super heavy poles. So for operationally, to be able to put that H-class pole back there would take a crane. So we looked at different technologies. A composite pole can offer an H-class structure at a lot less weight. And so for us, it was a technology advancement, because we can put a pole in the backyard that's stronger, that can meet our wind loading standards, and it's a much better from a restoration standpoint. So for each of those areas I detailed, we're looking at addressing the root cause, and then also what technologies are out there to help us solve it.
And when you are addressing the technologies and the root causes, how are you balancing affordability for customers through your resiliency plan?
I think it's at the forefront of any decision making. I just came from a speaking engagement, and one of the questions I brought up was, why can't we just go ahead and underground all of our overhead? Wouldn't that the most resilient thing? And the answer is yes. I truly believe that. I think undergrounding is the most. But the problem is, if I look at a 3-phase overhead line, I can harden that line. So put a bigger pole, bigger line, armless construction, harden that whole thing for around $300,000. Now, if I underground that same line on the 3-phase, it's probably going to be around $4 to $5 million. So every investment that I'm making is really paid for the customer. And so I've got to take into consideration that, yes, I've got to do a benefits cost analysis. Is the investment I'm making the best for the customer in that situation? Where I'd argue that hardening overhead in that situation is better because it less impacts the customer and provides a similar resiliency benefit. So for every investment that we're making, we're doing a benefits cost analysis to ensure that we're doing the right thing for the customer, not only from a resiliency standpoint, but from a cost standpoint, because affordability is a key issue for all Americans.
Thank you, Nathan. Data centers and load growth have been a topic, everywhere, including our extreme heat grid resilience planning training. So did you want to offer any insights on that as well?
So I do. So I'll share a quick stat for you. So CenterPoint's been in existence for about 160 years. Over the 160 years, our peak load is around 21 gigawatts. Yeah. So 160 years, 21 gigawatts. What's in the queue here in ERCOT for our area, we're projected to grow to about 42 gigawatts over the next 10 years. So we're basically going to grow over the next 10 years of what we've done and what took us already 160 years to get there. So the growth is astronomical that's coming down to the Houston area. And so when I think about that from a resiliency standpoint, our customers depend on us to provide reliable energy for them. And so we have got to build our system to be able to address that, because data centers can't be at risk of not making, of being offline. They just can't. They have to be online. And so every investment we're trying to make to understand what is the long-term benefit for those customers. We want to make good decisions for them, because if we can't provide guaranteed service for all these businesses, they're not going to come to Houston. They're not going to come to Texas. They're going to go somewhere else. And so we've really been challenged from material side to planning side to labor side to meet these, because a lot of these data centers come very, very quickly down the pipeline. So it's a double-edged sword of meeting their needs, but also making sure that we're building this to the resiliency standards, ensure that they have that service.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really insightful. We do have a couple of questions for you, but we will save those at the end so we can stay on schedule.
Sure.
So thank you, Nathan, for your participation today. Next, we have Eric Hawkins, who is from the state of Arizona. He is the Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel of Trico Electric Cooperative. Thank you, Eric. And when you are ready, the floor is yours.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for having me. So just threw together a couple of slides to walk through to talk about Trico and some of our efforts on resilience. So if we could go to that next slide. Just giving you an idea of what our service territory looks like. We're in southern Arizona, sort of surrounding the city of Tucson, and we cover quite a big geographic area for having 50,000 meters roughly. We actually go all the way down to the border in Mexico and then wrap around the city. Average summer high in Tucson is, I think technically it's 99 degrees, but right about 100 degrees. Fahrenheit. So certainly a big topic that we're dealing with every year. So the next slide, just talking about a few of the impacts that we see. So, one of the big issues that we have in terms of resilience is we have to build out for a summer peak, a cooperative size peak, 290 megawatts, but a winter peak that is 80 megawatts. So, we're spending all that additional money in the summer for those capacity costs. And then have a lot of extra resources over the winter. So trying to find ways to manage that. We have, and I'll talk about it a little bit, but we've built a couple of our own solar and battery projects, and even being able to make those resilient to the Sonoran Desert heat out here has been a challenge. Some things when we'll bring in a builder from who's used to building across the country. Things like plastic ties for wire management and things like that, even getting that small, that's not going to work when you're baking in some days that are up to 110, 115 degrees. Those start to fall apart real quickly. So just, I would say one of the things that we've learned is just thinking down to the most minute detail in terms of what we put into our projects, what we put into our system to make sure that we've got heat resistant, heat resilient type materials. We actually have a summer disconnection moratorium in Arizona. So when there are first the IOUs, it's basically a timing period between essentially June and September, October, that they are not allowed to disconnect any of their customers. As a co-op, we have a similar program. There's a little bit more flexibility, but the result ends up essentially the same. But if there's any sort of heat warning within a 3-day period, I believe it is, then we can't disconnect. So frankly, to be safe, we just say for that same summer period between essentially June and October that we're not disconnecting any members. It is a safety and health issue, so obviously that heightens the risk that we have to make sure that our system is staying on, producing, and keeping everybody's air conditioning running. Heat impacts even in terms of workforce, work hours, and then also safety and PPE. We were just sitting in safety committee last week and working through some new options for better breathable PPE. Obviously, when they're out there in full rubber gloves and the whole setup, and it's 110 degrees, and they're rushing to get somebody back into power during a summer storm, it's pretty uncomfortable. So, we do our best to find, even from a employee standpoint, what type of PPE, what type of clothing that we're able to put in place to keep them safe, but also to the maximum extent possible, keep them cool, especially with rules out there related to OSHA and state with heat and heat management. That's become an increasingly important issue for us to focus on, and then get started earlier in the mornings. We mentioned monsoon storms in Tucson. Really, we don't have much rain throughout the year. The heavy storms that we have all come during our hottest month. So that's the extra challenge for us because we're facing the most intense winds, and the winds that end up causing damage to our system all happen during weeks when it's also going to be 100, 110 sometime that week. They kind of come in quickly and cause damage. So one of the problems that we have to manage. So the next slide, just looking at a few of the things that we are working on. Nathan had mentioned some of the sensors and oversizing transformers. We certainly do try to do that on our system. We do limit in our design process, we have restrictions on how we load our transformers. I know in some colder states, we'll see folks go up to, I think, around 150% or so of some nameplate capacities. We try to keep that more limited, in addition to oversizing those transformers. Like I said, getting down to the details, but there is even just simple things like heat resistant paint out there on some of the pad mounted transformers help to protect them and help to keep them from having some issues during the summer. Increased size on radiator fans in some of our transformers is certainly something that we try to do. Looking at system resilience, so aluminum overhead conductor and light loading. Again, anything we can do to try to keep heat down on the system. A lot of that happens at the design and engineering level. We do face some challenges. A lot of folks out here, resorts, things like that, and certainly data centers as we've started to see some interest, and even other solar and battery projects, some really large HVAC systems and how we manage those. I'll say one of our largest loads is actually the battery load for a solar and battery facility that doesn't serve our system, but that is built in our system. And it's almost an 8 megawatt load for a 200 megawatt battery system. So those not something you're necessarily expecting, but even as we've built out our solar and battery projects, a lot of those batteries are not designed to best operate in these high heat conditions. So we had to take special steps when installing them, when bringing them out. We've really had to install them seasonally because they really can't go unpowered for any length of time, especially at high heat conditions, or it'll void your warranty. So we've had to plan around those schedules to make sure that we are making sure that we're not voiding the warranties on expensive batteries that we're installing for our system. I mentioned failures, just little things, but like plastics, PVC, that deteriorates at certain levels. So as you start to reach certain temperatures and reach those for longer, especially in dry conditions like Arizona, those just aren't going to work. So switching to metal riser pipes, ties, things like that, those little details can make a difference and save you a lot of time. It was quite a pain to have our folks go back through a 100-acre solar farm and redo all of the wire management because of plastic ties. And then, yeah, we below grade transformers and vaults. We'd certainly tried those in a couple of situations to meet members. As a co-op, we call our customers members. But to meet member needs, member requests, we had attempted some work with some below grade transformers, below grade vaults. Those can cause, additional heat, additional issues. So in many cases, we've just had to go away from that simply because it's going to it caused problems or was starting to cause problems. As Nathan said, we have been trying to move from more of a reactive to more of a proactive stance on a lot of these things. Installing sensors, working with a couple of different software providers, mostly on a beta process at this point to test out and see how effectively they can predict problems, predict issues on our system, so that hottest time of the month we aren't running into issues. And then the last slide, just real quickly, but a slightly different topic, but when we're out here in Arizona, one of the risks we have is, like I said, those storms come in the summer, and usually June is kind of our danger period because that's when the moisture isn't hitting the storm, so we're getting dry lightning storms. And we actually, in addition to serving 4,000 miles of desert, we actually serve the southernmost ski resort in the United States. So we've got a Forest Service area that dries out pretty much all winter with very little rain, and then we have those hot, dry storms in June. So wildfire mitigation may not be the first thing you're thinking about when you're talking about heat resilience, but certainly something that's connected. And just a couple of the examples of the things that we work on, making sure that we have good right-of-way clearance, making sure that we're putting together resilient systems that, for the most part, we're having to transmit the power from down here in the valley up into the mountains. So going from some days it can be 110 degrees down here, and you've got a storm up there and potential risk for fire. So a lot of challenges that we try to face, but try to do it in multiple different ways. So just a quick summary of some of the efforts that we take for setting up for heat resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, we will circle back to questions at the end for time. So I want to introduce our final utility representative. We have David Hernandez, based out of California. He is the manager of transmission and distribution engineering for Burbank Water and Power.
Thanks, Hialeah, for the introduction, and thank you all for the opportunity to give a little bit of information on how we plan for extreme heat. Now, granted, we don't have some of the temperatures that I'm hearing from Texas and Arizona, but yet that definitely that extreme heat that we do see has an impact on our system. Next slide, please. So Burbank Water and Power is a municipal-owned utility in the city of Burbank. We have a service area of 17 square miles. We're located in the San Fernando Valley, about 12 miles northwest of downtown LA. And the city was incorporated in 1911. And the population of Burbank is about 105,000 people. Next slide, please. So billed as the media capital of the world, Burbank boasts more than 1,000 media and entertainment companies, such as those companies actually shown on this slide. We also have an airport within the city of Burbank limits. It's the Hollywood Burbank Airport. They're in the process of actually installing a new terminal, which is shown here on this slide. And it's due to be, I think, commissioned in late 2026. Now, for those IKEA lovers, we have the largest IKEA in Burbank at about 470,000 square feet. Next slide, please. Burbank Water and Power has about 54,000 electric meters in total. This slide is a little outdated in that the residential meters just bumped up a little bit closer to 47,000 meters. We've got a lot of housing units going in, but the overall makeup of the meters hasn't changed much. In all, most of our load comes from commercial meters, and that's about 70% of our load. And I think the total makeup is only about, I think it's about 15% of the meter count is commercial meters. Next slide, please. Burbank still has a lot of overhead. About 60% of our distribution system is overhead, mixture of 4 kV and 12 kV. And we have about 40% underground. Still a lot of 4 kV feeders. We're in the process as part of managing our aging infrastructure of converting our 4 kV system to 12 kV in about a 10-year period. We have 18 electrical substations, which are served by 69 kV and 34.5 kV subtransmission lines. Next slide, please. So Burbank's summer loads, they typically hover around 280 megawatts or so. We have a system peak of 322 megawatts, so it's quite dense for a 17 square mile city. We have a 5-year average maximum ambient temperature of about 41.3 degrees C or 106.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, I realize this is not as high as some of those desert temperatures that you'd see in California, Arizona, or Texas, but definitely can wreak havoc on our system. Next slide, please. So some of the short-term planning that we do is engineering analysis, contingency planning that's a little more tied around resilience planning, because what we do is we take a look to see what weaknesses we have in the system. In general, things come up where equipment maybe not testing as well, so we're potentially anticipating or guessing that maybe that equipment's going to fail. We'll take a look at what it's going to take to actually back that equipment up if we do have another piece of equipment that fails, or that one as well. So that's something that we actually look at on a regular basis, or at least on an annual basis. From an asset loading standpoint, there's a number of things that we do annually ahead of each summer. One of those is phase balancing. And what phase balancing is the process of actually trying to equalize the loads amongst the 3 phases so that we don't get high neutral currents, which could actually cause our protective relays to trip and cause an outage. Circuit loading, we review our circuit loading on an annual basis using our SCADA data, and also conductor loading using our grid analytics, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And what we do is we check to see whether or not any circuits are overloaded near our planning criteria. And to the extent we can shift those loads from one circuit to another, we'll do that. But if it's going to take major upgrades, such as a brand new feeder or a brand new substation, it's just something that we'll have to actually address in our overall electric distribution master plan and capital plan. We do look at substation transformer loading and distribution loading ahead of the summer as well. Substation transformer loading is a little bit more difficult to accomplish, so that's usually handled from a capital planning standpoint. Distribution transformer loading is something that we definitely handle every year and try to pick off the most heavily loaded transformers. Next slide, please. So as I'd mentioned before, we do use grid analytics to analyze the overloaded transformers and in general assets that are being overloaded in our system. The grid analytics pulls data in from all of our 54,000 plus AMI meters. And what we do here is we get an idea of, for what transformers are overloaded in our system, where they're located, how much they're overloaded, and for how long. So that gives us a really good idea of what transformers we need to target and helps us prioritize which transformers are being replaced, because obviously we can't go out and replace all of them. We've got about I think 6,000 plus distribution transformers. So to give you an example, over this last summer, before the summer occurred, we replaced all of our transformers above 170%, and the ones between 150 and 170%, we provided like pre-engineered solutions. And that's kind of more for the resilience planning piece, so that if something didn't happen to one of those transformers, our crews would know what they needed to do as far as what size that transformer needed to be, or how they needed to shift load on that particular transformer. Next slide, please. So ahead of a heat wave, we have restricted maintenance notices too that go out by our Energy Control Center. And then if possible, our crews would restore any out of service equipment ahead of that heat wave. And then we also have our system operators and field crews either bring in additional crews during the heat wave, depending on the extent of it, and or at least have standby crews available. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have a 4 to 12 kV circuit conversion program, which helps us basically manage our aging infrastructure. It's not heat that's really driving that in general, but I included this because when we do that 4 to 12 kV conversion, it does increase the capacity of the circuits by 3 times basically for a given size conductor. So what that does is it helps us, just really helps us, gives us a lot more margin when we do have those higher temperatures. Those substation transformers are obviously a critical component in our electrical substations. Burbank Water and Power is saying lead times go from less than 1 year to 4 years right now for substation transformers, which causes us a lot of concerns, and we obviously want to make sure that those transformers are as reliable as possible. So in 2021, we actually had a project where we had to review our temperature specifications to replace a couple of transformers, and then I'll go in further as to what we discovered there. Next slide, please. So our substation engineers found that we had some climbing temperatures. The max ambience temperatures were rising. This is a graph is over a 25-year period, and you can see the linear regression line indicates that the end of linear regression is about 42 degrees Celsius in the 2025. And that's important because IEEE values for transformers assume a maximum ambient temperature of 40 degrees C. Next slide, please. IEEE standards also generally have a 30 degrees C average daily temperature. It's usually called a 24-hour daily temperature. And what we found is over a 25-year period is that that temperature is rising to about 32 degrees C in 2025. Next slide, please. So as a result, BWP changed its temperature ratings for its substation transformers, which the maximum ambient rating was changed from 40 degrees C to 50 degrees C, and the average rating was changed from 30 degrees C to 35. That's the average 24-hour rating, daily rating.
I don't have anything to talk about.
So obviously there's the pros were increased thermal
Want me to
margin.
hold it?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Davey, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. So obviously there's did you hear did you hear me when I talked about the changed temperature ratings? I'm not sure where that cut out.
I think on like the second half of your sentence, but if you want to
Okay,
just repeat
great.
it, you're good.
Okay. So obviously the pros of doing this change to the temperature ratings was increased thermal margin on the transformer's insulation system, which leads to longer life and enhanced system reliability. The cons is that we saw like a 4% increase on the transformers, which we were able to manage within our project budgets, and a 3% larger transformer. And that it could be an issue for us, but we were able to manage that within the footprints that we have. But in Burbank, we have in an urban environment, and space is generally a premium. But fortunately, it did cause us an issue. We have ordered 2 transformers with the new temp ratings. The picture to the left there are the 2 transformers that we ordered and put in service last year, and we have 5 more in order. Just for reference, those transformers are 33.6 MVA, 69 to 12.47 kV. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So we will transition to Q&A. So I see David, Eric, and Nathan. So we'll start with you, David, since you were the last to present. Is there an emerging technology that you have seen or, carefully approaching that you're excited about when it comes to mitigating extreme heat?
Emerging technology. Definitely not with respect to substation transformers. I don't believe that technology has changed too much in the last 40 or 50 years. No, but I could tell you that when it comes down to reducing the amount of load on transformers, what we have looked at is potentially adding energy storage to actually do some peak shaving, and reducing the capacity on those would actually help us during those summer heat loads.
Thank you. This is to Eric. Curious to hear if the solar and BESS microgrids you mentioned are only used as backup during outages, or if they're also operated in parallel to the grid on blue sky days, for example, peak shaving on, say, extreme heat/low days.
Yeah, they are used during blue sky days as well. Yeah, for peak shaving, market arbitrage in some cases, but yeah, certainly using both the batteries and solar from that perspective. I would say it's an interesting balance that I think we're still figuring out. Is if you want it for resilience, obviously you can't have used it over the peaks. So really, it's a data analytics task of looking at when we're charging, when we expect to have storms. Usually they come in roughly the 5 or 6 p.m. type period for us. So we usually have enough time to know if the storm's coming, and then if it's not coming, be able to use it over some periods when market prices are high, and then and potentially shave our peak. And then charge them the next morning off of the solar.
Thank you for answering that question. We have a question for, let's see if I can go back up for Centerpoint. I thought I saw it.
Yeah, hi Leah, I can ask it for you. I have it here.
Okay,
This is Miles.
thank you.
It said, what software tools or platforms are the panelists' utilities currently using for distribution system planning and the benefit cost analysis of projects? I think this could go to everybody.
Yeah, I could go. I don't know specifically what we're using for distribution planning. I have to follow up. I know we're doing a lot of our resiliency modeling using NERA digital twin, and then what we do from there is we can calculate the reliability benefits. So specifically, we're looking at SAIDI, including MEDs. So that's SAIDI with major event days included. So for us, we say that is the ultimate resiliency measure, because it's your day-to-day reliability plus how well you perform during major, great black sky days. And so based off of the modeling, we could say, all right, if you did this type of work, you're going to have this type of impact on SAIDI MEDs. And it's just a benefits cost analysis of, all right, it's this cost with this reliability benefit ratio. And so that's how we'll compare those projects.
I'll answer for Burbank. Yeah, we use Synergy for distribution planning software, And we have PSLF. It's a GE product for subtransmission planning and load flow analysis. Let's see. We also, I mentioned earlier, we use an advanced grid analytics platform. It's a Landis+ Gear platform that we're currently using right now for our grid analytics. And we don't have software for cost benefit analysis. Those are generally manual spreadsheets that we use.
Gotcha. Yeah, for Trico's perspective, I believe I can double check on this, but I believe we use MillSoft for that planning purposes. I would say the last 18 months or so, we've been using, on the proactive approach, using a company called Brillet. It's another cooperative, but they have some predictive data analytics that look at meter data, system data, MDM data, and then try to draw conclusions about potential overloading in certain areas. So one of the products we're using.
I had somebody from my engineering team reply back. The technology we use for distribution planning is called it's CYME, power system analysis.
Okay, thank you all. We heard about data centers in the state panel. What impact are they having on the planning processes at your respective utilities, particularly when it comes to high heat / high load periods? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, it's been very challenging when we've been approached by data centers. Nothing has actually happened. We've gone as far as actually completing feasibility studies, but then data centers back out eventually. But when we're doing our planning, the challenge for us has been managing how much load we're able to serve, because we do have some reserve capacity, but we can't do that at the expense of meeting some of our other obligations. In the state of California, we have a lot of electric transportation goals. We also have a lot of housing goals, and Burbank needs to build about another 16,000 housing units in the next, I believe, 7 to 10 years or so. So that's and a lot of increased load. So it's been that challenge. So if we give up that capacity, then how are we going to manage getting more capacity for these other programs or policies that we need to make, and balance that with supply chain issues, because we can't just go out and build an interconnecting station at the 230-69 kV level to bring in more capacity into the system, more energy into the system within 5 years. That's more of a 10 to 15-year time frame.
We've just to add on that, so it's certainly a big challenge. We've had like I mentioned, 270 megawatt load, and we've seen I think about a dozen data centers worth of interest in the last 18 months or so. The Phoenix area in Arizona is a big data center capital and is getting a little bit built out, so they're looking at other parts of the state. So yeah, for a small cooperative trying to plan for that, we've added employee resources. We've worked through a couple of different feasibility studies. I would say some of the things to think about and what you're balancing is there's sort of a short term and long term to it, because a lot of the data centers need to get on if they're going to make it happen within roughly 24 months. We've been told, because otherwise their equipment and their planning is all outdated by the time they build it. So if it's longer than that, then it's not worth it for them. So trying to put together short-term packages, which are typically including, market type purchases, and then trying to build generation resources for the longer term, or source generation resources for the longer term is certainly a big challenge. And I will say the maybe silver lining of it is that we have seen that there is a decent appetite for them incurring a substantial amount of costs in terms of the transmission and distribution resources that need to be built to be able to serve them. And because they are so sensitive to outages, resilience is all they talk about. So in some cases, we think that there can be some benefits for our system as a whole by bringing them on, but as David said, we don't have one yet. We're nearing the end of a couple of different studies, so we'll wait and see where that goes.
Yeah, just all similar issues that everybody's mentioned. CenterPoint's dealing with too. I mean, these data centers come in fast. They need things very quickly, and then having limited capacity some areas is a challenge. Getting materials in that time frame is another big challenge. It's just, I think all utilities in the United States are battling this right now. It's just, how do we meet the demand with that quick turnaround?
Thank you. We do have a question in the chat. What do the utility planning and operations staff, particularly TEP, due to high solar penetration, think of standalone BESS to charge with the excess low cost during the day and discharging during the evening when air conditioners are still on and PV generation goes away? Mark, hopefully I read that right, but if you would like to provide any clarity, feel free to come off mute and provide some context.
Okay, did I get the mute to go away?
Yes.
Okay. In CAISO and ERCOT, and actually Nevada has the highest kilowatts per capita. So they've got probably the worst duck curve, but everybody talks about CAISO. The CAISO duck curve, it's because of 15 gigawatts, 60 gigawatt hours roughly of energy storage. In the last 2 years, natural gas use on the California grid has declined by close to 40%. So, it's just batteries, and if there's already existing solar, batteries just help get rid of natural gas fuel costs, and you've got all this, almost free. The variable cost of PV is like near zero, so you might as well take advantage of it. So I guess that's the context.
Yeah, I can go first. It's certainly a big issue for us. With 50,000 members, we've got 6,000 members with rooftop solar, so pretty high penetration percentage at least. We've designed a battery program for members to try to help them save money, but also take advantage of all that excess production during the day. And then, we certainly, as a strategy, the microgrids that we built, we also have some standalone battery projects that we're putting together to do exactly what you're saying, to try to capture some of that low-cost solar during the day and be able to use it over our peak when it's, roughly 6 p.m. and all the solar is. I think the last study we did, at our peak, we were seeing solar was down at I think about 14% or something like that of the what we usually see. So the timing doesn't work for us with that duck curve exactly as you say, but certainly ways to work with it and maybe even have even bigger benefits by charging those batteries during the day.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for the response.
Did any of our other panelists have any comments for Mark's question? No. Okay, well, we are at time, so I just want to thank you again, David, Eric, and Nathan, for your participation and sharing your insights today. And thank you for your willingness to answer questions and engage in this dialogue. Back to you, Miles.
Hi, Leia. And yes, I'd like to second that. Thanks, Eric, Nathan, and Dave. Really appreciate your insights on the utility perspective on resilience to extreme heat. With that, I'd like to thank everybody. Hi, Leia, thanks so much for moderating that panel, and big thanks to all our panelists today for participating and for their support of the webinar. As I mentioned, I'll follow up with an email that includes a link to our our webinars project page, which will have the slides that we'll post, along with eventually a recording of today's webinar. So on behalf of Berkeley Lab and in partnership with NARUC and NASIO, and with support from the Department of Energy's Grid Deployment Office, thanks so much for everyone for joining today, and hope to see you at a future event.
Thank you.